Morning, good afternoon, good evening. One of the tragic things about Zimbabwe is the way we keep repeating the same thing over and over again. After 44 years of independence, we are yet to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We don't seem to be able to get it. The nation had a bitter war of independence, fighting for freedom, justice, and human dignity. As blacks, most of us played their part in that struggle. Many people lost very lives. And yet, after independence, 44 years after independence, we are still fighting for the same things. Things like freedom of expression, the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. So we're just going round and round in circles. I think that is really one of the most disappointing things about Zimbabwe. In the picture there is some of the human rights activists who were taken off the plane by the regime. Some of them were tortured by the regime. Their only crime was that they were suspected that they would hold demonstrations during the Sadak, they just ended Sadak Summit. There were many people were planning to protest during that summit to remind the Sadak leaders that Zimbabwe had failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And the regime was adamant that that should not happen. Here is Chris Mutsangwa, the Zanu PF spokesperson, talking and justifying the arrests of the would-be protesters.
Inini ndakakura naamai vanga vari strict. Ukati musuno yatete woita manyemwe wotaura zvemanga-manga uchitaura kuti atete vangu varipo. Amai vangu vanokuratidza kuti muyeni haupinimidze pamberi pemuyeni. All this time the SADC was quiet because they are disorganized. Now we have a major a diplomatic event which we have worked hard to host, which we are doing everything possible to look as spruced as ever, to look good. Amai vangu vakugezesa kuti muonekwe zvakanaka naatete. Iwo wakusvika ipapo wakuti vanonditi pamberi paatete. Amai vangu vanokutorera shambu pamberi paatete ipapo vokushapura. Vabva futi atete vokurova futi kuti hazviitwi. This is mischief on the part of Chamisa. It has nothing to do with showing Democrats, because if he wanted to be democratic, he should have won the elections. If he wanted to be democratic, he would have sorted the mess in his party through democratic means. He didn't sort that out. How do you want to be democratic by demonstrating Usue Sadak when you are not democratic by running the affairs of your party on a day-to-day basis? It's mischief, and we are a party which fought a war. We know the pain of organization. We know the sacrifice of discipline in order to achieve certain ends. Don't try to taunt Zanu PF, because we've gone through worse things than before. And there is nothing for Zanu PF which is worse than a war. So we don't want to be taunted as a party. Kuda kufadza vayeni musi wavanouya. We will not allow it. Kupinimidza pamberi pevayeni, we will not allow it.
The tragedy is, of course, that Zimbabwe has failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections for the last 44 years. 44 years, and we still to enjoy the basic right to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. Zanu PF blatantly rigged last year's elections. That is a historic fact. Sadak election observers, the AU election observers, they've all condemned last year's elections as flawed and illegitimate. And yet we have got the regime itself boasting that those elections were free, fair, and credible. Is Mnangagwa himself insisting that the elections were free, fair, and credible? Here is a man who lives in his own world.
Kana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vakwashi kurumbidza nekuchikanganisa. Ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa farai. You are doing correct things for your country. Homu takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelection anofamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
Can't keep on dismissing everybody as ndezvavo. They don't know what they're talking about. In the past, the European Union, the Americans, and other nations with a reputation for holding free, fair, and credible elections condemned the election process. And Zanu PF dismissed them. Last year, it was different. The regional body, Sadak, and the continental body, the AU, election observers, also said the same thing, that the elections were not free, fair, and credible. And yet, here we are. Mnangagwa himself is dismissing ndezvavo. Here is a regime that really doesn't care about honoring its citizens' fundamental rights and freedoms. And so we find ourselves with a government of the day that is corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical. And we are stuck with it because it is able to rig elections and get away with it. That is our nightmare. Here is Mtsangwa speaking the other day about what should happen with some of our people who were detained for fear that they would hold protests.
Reasons for that. Can you imagine that mayhem on the occasion of an important summit like this? So the show, the cameras, your cameras, they move away from the event at the new parliament buildings in Mount Hampton, showing this majestic building to the world, and the graceful heads of states being made anxious about their presence in Zimbabwe because of tumultuous crowds organized by deviant Zimbabweans. No, we couldn't allow that. It was not allowed. And I'm very happy about that the security sector lived up to its billing. We are talking of generally people who are given to disorder, people who never want to see their country cast in a good light. If you don't want your country cast in a good light, so chawakagarira panyika chii? Kungosvora chete zvinhu zvekumba kwamai yako. Ukaenda kudonwa doro nevamwe ukandotamba nevamwe, amai vangu havaiti, baba vangu havaiti, vaning'ina vangu havaiti. Chinyi ichocho? Imbowanwo chaunofarirawo. This was a show for Zimbabweans in the sub-region. Even if you are the opposition, musiwo womboitawo munhu kwaye. But no, they just work for the interests of those who never want to see Africa in a good light. So with deviants, those are deviants, and they were dealt with properly. And they failed. And we are very happy that they failed. And they will never succeed again. This was their last at misbehavior. They will never get another chance again. Because now they know what happens when they try to behave in a certain manner. And I'm sure there will be a good reason to free them up soon afterwards because there's no show to disturb. The show, what they wanted to step is over, so there's absolutely no reason to keep them at the status expense in jail after failing. We reward their failure by giving them their freedom. But there's nothing to disturb anymore.
How sickening is that? This is the typical mentality of a high schoolboy bully. He will tread on your toes and laugh at it as if it's a big joke. This is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. We fought a bitter war of independence for freedom, human rights, and dignity. And now we are having to fight the whole thing all over again with a regime that has all but captured all the state institutions, the police, the army, the CIO, the judiciary, you name it. They are all Zanu PF departments in all but name. How sad. We come this far only to find ourselves back where we started. I think this is really tragic. The more so, of course, that the country did have the opportunity to implement reforms and end the Zanu PF dictatorship during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. And alas, that opportunity was wasted. And now we are regretting it at our own leisure. How this nightmare is going to end, and it can't end soon enough. Anybody's case. We have a regime that believes they have the right to rule us they please. And we are stuck with them. We are stuck. I find it really disappointing that the regime is laughing about it, as if it's a big joke. Are we ever going to get it right? I think that is the question that we really must sit down and ask ourselves. 44 years after independence, and we still can't hold free, fair, and credible elections. We still can't treat our own fellow Zimbabweans as human beings. We arrest them, torture them, and we think it's a joke. It is tragic. This really is tragic. What is the way forward? I think that is a good question. The way forward, the way I see it, is that we have got to make sure that 2028, we do not make the same mistake we made last year. What was that mistake? Well, we participated in a flawed election. And by participating in our millions, we gave the process legitimacy. As much as Sadak election observers condemned the election as flawed and illegal, the very fact that Zimbabweans participated in those elections in their millions, like it or not, gave those Sadak leaders who didn't want to do anything about Zimbabwe the excuse to do nothing. We cannot afford to give them another excuse to do nothing. Because we can be certain of one thing. Zanu PF is determined to rig the 2028 elections. Make no mistake about that. Zanu PF is not going to reform itself out of office. And the opposition, such as it is, will participate in 2028 elections. But if they fail to con people to participate in those flawed elections in our millions, then the process will have no credibility. Sadak will have the opportunity to step in and deny Zanu PF legitimacy. So the onus is on us to make sure that we do not make the mistake of participating in the flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. The opposition had their own reason why they participated. It's greed. Why some people continuously refuse to accept that reality is their problem. Whether we like it or not, we have got a ruling party, Zanu PF, that believes that they have the divine right to rule Zimbabwe. And they've exercised that right by blatantly denying people their basic freedoms and rights, including the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country, and even the right to life. We also have an opposition that people risk life and limb to elect. And the task of the opposition was to implement democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Mugabe has bribed those opposition leaders to forget about the reforms. And they did. They've been participating in flawed elections out of greed. Some people have found it difficult to swallow that bitter pill, but so it is. That is the truth. And our failure to swallow it have only made ourselves victims, because the opposition have conned millions of Zimbabweans to participate in flawed elections. And as long as we keep participating in these flawed elections, millions, I believe Sadak will find it difficult to deny the Zanu PF political legitimacy. And to be quite honest, with the present political setup, even if Sadak was to deny Zanu PF political legitimacy, if the alternative is the same MDC of 2008 to 2013, you've got to ask yourself, what is going to change? If they fail to implement even one token reform during the last GNU, what makes you believe that they will do so now? The answer is there really is no reason to believe they will do so now. So at the present moment, if there's going to be any meaningful political change in Zimbabwe, that change is going to come from us, the people. First of all, by realizing that in the opposition, MDC, CCC, we have got not partners fighting in our corner, but individuals who have failed to implement reforms and have been participating in flawed elections out of greed. That is the reality. The best we can do now, the best move we can make now, is to make sure that people are not conned into participating in flawed elections in 2028. Deny Zanu PF the support in the form of people participating in those flawed elections in their millions. And I believe Sadak will deny Zanu PF political legitimacy. And we'll have a chance to have another GNU implement the reform, the democratic reforms, and have a new political system from which we can have competent leaders and opposition and political parties, and put ourselves back on the democratic footing again. That is the only way out. That is the only way we're going to silence people like Mtsangwa boasting of their accomplishments. Thank you very much for listening. And I'll end with giving Mtsangwa the final say again.
Reasons for that. Can you imagine that mayhem on the occasion of an important summit like this? So the show, the cameras, your cameras, they move away from the event at the new parliament buildings in Mount Hampton. showing this majestic building to the world, and the graceful heads of states being made anxious about their presence in Zimbabwe because of tumultuous crowds organized by deviant Zimbabweans. No, we couldn't allow that. It was not allowed.
Deviant Zimbabweans. That's what we are now to the Zanu PF tyrannical and oppressive regime. We have to fight to end it. It's not going to be an easy fight. But if we are smart, we can end it without even firing a single gun. We must stop participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. Thank you very much, and have a good day.